Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. My name is Jason Starr. This will be pretty much the last you hear of me because it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, who is Lisa Hart. Lisa Hart runs search operations for Wheless Partners. Many of you will know Wheless Partners, but they are a national search firm in the States. I believe they have approximately 9 offices across the country, and they cover executive and board search from all of those. I'm going to ask Lisa to take the reins now and talk you through her presentation.
Well, let's move on to the first slide, which is going to be a bit about myself. And I thought to begin with a little information. And I would consider my most notable accomplishment was being a full-time mom of 2 now adult, fantastic children. And then after they were further along in age, I returned to both the workforce and to school full-time and graduated with honors. I've led and still lead searches on behalf of top organizations and connected with excellent people who I've learned a lot from over the past 5 years. I've been in contact with so many extraordinary leaders that if I captured all that I've heard, it would be a best-selling book on leadership. And prior to my work in executive search, I had the pleasure and honor of serving our community through the YMCA of Birmingham, Alabama. And when I'm not working, I enjoy travel, reading, staying active, volunteer work, and spending time with my family. Let's move to the next slide. Well, before I answer the question of when a recruiter calls, what to expect, I wanted to give you a little more information and background, not knowing your understanding about retained and contingent search. So to oversimplify a bit, there are 3 major differences, and those are approach, positions, and fee structure. And the most significant difference would be approach. Let's move on. So retained executive search, the approach, at least for Wheless Partners, and I can only give you that perspective really, is we look at candidates from 3 different characteristics, and there are many. And we've distilled that into something that's memorable for us called a selection tried template. And those 3 areas include, first of all, professional competencies or your background, experience, abilities, skills, technical knowledge. And those are the things that are easiest to determine about someone. That's what we would find online. Leadership indicators include direction, drive, influence, relationship, and execution. And it's a bit trickier to get your hands around understanding leadership indicators. And similar to professional competencies, they are particular to the position that we're recruiting for. As an example, a couple years ago, we were engaged for a search where the current executive, who was also difficult to work with, was going to remain in place for a couple years as a consultant following the new executive coming on board. So among all the other many characteristics we were seeking, we wanted a leader who would also have courage. And the way we go about discovering leadership indicators, it is really fascinating, in part is to ask good questions and compare answers to others. And there are many outcomes. There's a large database that Gallup organization has because they have done tens of thousands of leadership assessments all over the world. And we use that to help us to understand the answers to the question. We use it as a benchmark. For example, a question we might ask is, if you ask what is the story of your professional life, and someone provides a narrative versus a list of positions they've held, we would consider that person to be a good communicator. Or, why is being a leader important to you? This helps to discover the characteristic that we call vision. If their answer is about having a positive impact on others or is other person focused, we would consider them to be someone who possesses vision. Along the bottom of the triangle, you will see personality, perspectives, and values-driven attributes. It is on the bottom for a reason. It is foundational. And these attributes contribute to cultural fit. And someone may possess professional competencies. They may check the box with leadership indicators. But if they're not a cultural fit within the organization, their ability to advance the organization and to work well with the people within their organization is greatly diminished, and probably indicative that it's not going to be a good long-term fit. Personality, perspectives, and values-driven attributes can only be discovered through investing time with someone. So it's how we experience a candidate, how we interact, how they interact with us. And my colleague and I work as a team to detect different facets of personality, and people usually readily display values through the way that they interact and answer questions or describe experiences. Organizations are at a great risk when there is failure to attract the correct leaders. So we focus on all these areas when we get to know candidates, and we also counsel or teach our client representatives to do so. Let's move to the next slide. Another difference would be positions, and this is pretty basic. We at Wheless Partners are usually engaged for searches that are director level and above. And retained search involves far less volume because of the positions we're seeking to fill. It is a many-step process. It's highly intentional and time-consuming. A minimum time frame to conduct a search once we begin to go out into the candidate market is around 60 days, and there's a lot that goes on before we go out into the market. It's common for a search to last between 90 and 120 days, and the searches are also very much driven by our clients. Let's move on. So fees. The difference in fees, the structure is different, and they generally are, and I would say probably always, greater, though they are negotiable. So many times fees are based on a percentage of first year's compensation, including bonuses, direct expenses such as admin support, travel, lodging, meals, advertising. Many times firms will have a minimum fee, and some firms are on a fixed fee schedule. So that fee won't vary no matter what. And then at times we will agree to be engaged for a fixed fee. Contingent search fees are received only if the position is filled and billed upon acceptance of the position. And retained search fees are billed beginning with a signed contract, and over the course of the search, either at time-based intervals like 30, 60, 90 days, or upon milestones that are agreed upon in the beginning of the search, which would be maybe candidate presentation and acceptance of offer. That's when you would get bills with retained search or invoices. We continue the search until a position is filled. So we continue to work alongside our client organizations until we come to the place where there's an offer. Pardon me?
Sorry, just a question. This is one that was asked in a webinar I hosted a few days ago, and I couldn't answer it. You talked about a typical search being 90 to 100 days. What is the longest you've seen in a search? Can you give an example of something like that?
Yes.
But at least to completion.
Actually, I am still involved in one that I began. The contract was signed a year ago, December. And the reason is definitely our client. It's difficult for them to convene all the individuals that they wish to have on the panel interview. And then once they do so, there is not agreement really about what they're looking for. And so really before we move forward anymore, and we've kind of paused it, they need to decide what is the strategic position? What is it that we're looking for? So it's still ongoing. We received all of our retained fee, and we're still working for them, but it has not wrapped yet. That's the longest I know.
Well, it must be really challenging trying to keep the candidates live in a situation like that, because presumably you've spoken to people throughout this process.
Yes, and it is. And the way that I do that is I communicate honestly with them, and I give them insight on where the client is, and I stay in touch. And if they reach out to me, it's been a little period of time, then I let them know everything that I know. So, yes. And then also with the retained search, and we'll finish this slide up, is we have a guarantee. So if someone departs their position within a year, just decides to leave, not they're laid off for any reason, we'll restart the search, and there's no fee. So let's move to the next slide. Before recruitment begins, a lot goes on. So our firm represents the client initially, cultivating candidate relationships. And an abundance of time is invested so that we get to know our clients, and that makes us better ambassadors on their behalf and helps us to locate a person that's the best fit for the position. We have a very robust process that involves getting to know them through asking good questions and listening a lot, speaking with many stakeholders, developing an understanding or kind of a feel for the organization. And we go on site to do that. And typically it's a couple of days worth of meetings. Some of the questions that we'll ask our clients before we go to the candidates are, what are the immediate and primary challenges this leader will face? How does this position fit within the organization? Or what are the short and long-term accomplishments that are desired? Blue sky thinking is prompted by the question, if you could hire anyone, what would be the characteristics they would possess? Or are there people you would consider to be perfect for the position? And we will recruit them. The crucial takeaway from all of these meetings is the evolution of an understanding, at least in part, of the unique culture in the organization and what is needed to strategically fill these positions. It helps us to develop our search criteria as well. So let's move to the next slide. So the answer to the question posed at the beginning when I call what to expect, and I changed this to I instead of recruiter because every recruiter is unique. So with me, what you can expect is that I'll be prepared and I'll provide information on a specific active search. I'll know the organization and the specifications and the nuances of who would constitute a good fit. All the work that's been done previously will help inform me so that I can inform you. I will have completed research prior to calling you. I'll learn about you before I contact you. I try to match as closely as possible because I don't want to waste candidates' time. And the caveat being, it may not be an obvious fit to you in the beginning, but an example is if the organization is much larger for which I'm recruiting, I would consider you, perhaps you're in a smaller organization and you're at a place in your career where you are ready for more responsibility. So you might be recruited into an organization of a different size. If you're uninterested, I'm going to ask you for recommendations because some of the strongest candidates I've had come from referrals, and I will always be respectful of your location and ask if you're in a position to speak with me. Most contact initially is made these days through GatedTalent or LinkedIn, and so you won't be getting as many calls probably in the past. I've seen that change in the past 5 years. And as far as email, some executives continue to have administrative personnel monitoring email addresses, so I do my best to avoid email addresses. I'm always respectful of your time. In the initial call, I'm cognizant that you are a busy person, and we can reschedule more time if necessary, and that will be around your schedule. If you have some level of interest, I'm going to provide more information. I'm going to send you the search criteria, and at times I do that initially in the early outreach to gain your attention, especially if it's an organization that's well known. And if you want to begin the process of consideration, when we interview, I will have well thought out questions that pertain to this particular search, and I will take notes and share them with my colleague. And I'll do my best to answer questions you have. If I don't know the answer, I will obtain information and get back to you. I will inform you of next steps, and we will remain in contact through email, phone calls, text, whatever your preference is throughout our time working together on a search.
Out of interest, Lisa, again, I know it can vary, but how many candidates might you talk to and identify in a search? Because obviously it takes time to identify people, it takes time to research them, it takes time to make contact. What level of long list would be typical for you?
Well, the initial outreach usually falls right around only about 200 people, and what I mean by outreach would be my initial contact to try to gain interest. I usually end up speaking with about probably 30 to 40 people. Most times, I don't present more than anywhere between 10 and 12 people initially to our clients. It's a very small group. Most of the time, our clients will narrow from there and be able to determine a person of choice within that group.
Thank you.
So it does take a lot of time, but
Indeed.
the time spent is worth it. In the past, Wheless Partners would send mass emails. And of course, there were people who were well qualified within those emails, but I find that the connection rate is higher with this individual attention in the beginning, that the connection makes sense, and the response rate is greater in individualized attention from the beginning. So let's move to the next slide. So if you continue in the process with Wheless Partners, and I'm certain some of these steps would be involved in other search firms, this is what you would go through. Well, the first would be submission of your resume, and that can happen either before we interview or after. And then I would provide search criteria to you, and as I said earlier, that could be early on or it could be later in the process, but I want you to get to know more about the organization, the area, and all before we interview, hopefully. Then we would have a teleconference interview. It's just 20 or 30 minutes, and hopefully get to know you and that you would feel comfortable with me, and I will take notes and then schedule the next teleconference interview, and that would be with a colleague of mine who I work very closely with. His name is Mabry Smith. And then we would ask you to complete the executive summary questionnaire, which is anywhere from 5 to 10 questions that are answered in essay style, and we ask for attention. So it may take you a week or a little more with all the other things that you have on your plate, but this document, along with your resume, is what would be submitted at presentation to our client. And this is done so typically through email. We would send those documents along, and then our clients take a couple weeks usually to consider who they wish to invite for a meeting. At that time, you might be invited for an interview with the client organization, and this could be first round teleconference or video conference call. It's at the client's discretion, and we provide coaching prior to any of our candidates meeting with our clients. If you're invited for a second interview, that's typically face-to-face, and it would be most likely introduction to others and a tour of the organization in the area as well. At this time, our clients usually can make a decision on who they wish to make an offer to, and we represent both candidates and clients in the offer period, and we're able to do so because early in the process, I'm going to ask you about a goal for making a move as far as your compensation goes. So I have some insight into that is not provided to our client, and it's important that all parties are in a good place regarding compensation. So if at any point in the process, if you choose to enter it, you're welcome to exit. We just ask that you let us know. And it's because we begin to develop a relationship, and it's valuable to make a good impression with each other. And in kind, at any point in the process, if you are no longer in consideration, I'm going to call you. I'm not going to email you, and I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to call you. And if there is feedback that I can share, I'll be certain to share it with you. Let's move on to the next slide. So here's some suggestions for interviewing well. The first one is to prepare and do your homework on the organization, the position. Look at who is currently holding the position. Think about perhaps challenges they may be facing, and begin to think about how you might advance the organization. And everyone who is a candidate is open to, is at a high level. And so your competition's at a high level. So you really want to do your homework before you show up for an interview. Also be prepared with technology, which yes, we had a little challenge this morning, even though we prepared, so you just never know. And we work with our candidates on those kinks. We actually get on a video teleconference with you prior to. We give tips on camera angles, background lighting, all kinds of tips so that you show up at your best. And be sure you're in a location with no distractions. And we've all been told and believe in the past 30 years that we are good at multitasking, and it's just not true. So locate yourself somewhere that's quiet and then get comfortable. Standing is a good posture for a teleconference call. Smile periodically. You can hear it in a conversation, even if you can't see it. Relax. And I have found this particular TED Talk, TED Global 2012 with Amy Cuddy, Your Body Language May Shape Who You Are, is one that can be easily implemented anywhere and helps relieve anxiety. And there are many online. So that's a good thing to study when you have some time to and implement. Be genuine. People know when you're creating a narrative versus sharing an experience. Be transparent. We have opportunities for growth, all of us. It's not a weakness. If you're aware and open about your opportunities for growth, it allows the organization to bring others alongside you who will best complement you. We all work on teams, and we all can strengthen and help each other. Be honest. If you don't have an answer or don't have an experience, be honest. It displays humility and confidence, which is essential in a leader who others will want to follow. Pay attention to what's being asked and answer appropriately. Focus on the question. Attempt to keep your mind from running ahead. Reflect on your response. And reflect on the question, and the response is going to be appropriate. Take a moment if needed to think about your answer. And it's perfectly fine to say, will you give me a few moments to consider? It displays thoughtfulness and the intention to understand and answer appropriately. Ask for clarification if needed. At times, a question may require additional explanation because each of us have filters in place through which we're receiving information. And if you don't ask, it can come across as avoidance or that you aren't listening. And the interview is very much about understanding your communication style and skills, as well as seeking answers to questions. Periodically make eye contact with everyone if you're interviewing with more than one person. And be prepared. Can't overstress that.
Question for me, Lisa. Generally speaking, how long would you envisage that a senior level interview might actually last?
Well, if you've gotten to the point where it's with the client, it's usually the initial interview. If it's video teleconference call, could be 45 minutes to an hour. Second interviews can go on longer. That interaction can be an hour, 2 hours. Many times second interviews will be several interviews. So you may be meeting with the hiring authority, the person who will hire you, but also people who you would work among, some of the team, some of the people who'd report up to, key stakeholders within the organization. You may meet with some board members. So that could be a day in town of meetings and lunch and perhaps even dinner. So the second interview can be quite robust and extensive.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. A call from a recruiter, one way to think about it, is you're being invited to tap into an extensive professional network. So take the call and respond to the email, even though you're happy and not looking. My mission and purpose is to connect people, and we never know how we may help each other in the future. And if I get to know you a bit and a position comes up for which you may be interested, I'll get in touch with you. And I often hear from people who decided not to enter the process and ask, do you currently have a search similar to the one that you engaged me in some time ago? And the answer most always is no. And timing isn't everything, but it is significant. Entering the process isn't a job offer. It's a series of steps, and you can exit at any time. And the worst case with entering this process is you add to your network, you learn about other organizations, you update your resume, and we all should keep it up to date anyway, we're told. And you complete a questionnaire, and most candidates report that completing the questionnaire is an enjoyable time of reflection, and they find it affirming. So that's it for me. I'm honored that you all have shared your precious time with me today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa. And certainly I'm sure I speak for everybody on the session in thanking you for your time and thoughts. One question just to kick things off, which is from me. there's often a degree of confusion amongst executives about the role of a recruiter, and obviously you work for the client, but a lot of executives who are sort of going through a search process for the first time don't always appreciate that. Is that something you can perhaps put some comments on?
Yes, well, our role truly is to represent the client, and it's not that we neglect our candidates. It's that we are on a mission to find that perfect person. And so, whereas with a staffing agency, if I were looking for a position, I might go to them and say, this is what I would like to, this is a position I would like to have, and here are my, skills, and here's my resume. That's not how we do things. It's the other side of it. We go to the client, and then we go out in the market and try to match to what our client needs are. And so I'm not obtaining resumes, just I've got a stack of resumes over here, and then I get this search, and I'm going to go into them and find the perfect person or a group of people I want to present. So that's the main difference for us. I hope that helps.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. So the questions are coming in now. Next one is from Stefano. Thank you, Stefano. Stefano is interested to know when references are likely to be asked for. When in the process would you expect to see references?
At the end. If you're a final candidate, you're in the top, for example, 4, that's when we would check references.
Thank you. Thomas is keen to know any advice you can give in terms of creating the first impression when you receive a call from a recruiter. So is there anything you look for in that initial call when you speak to a candidate for the first time?
Be yourself. Be yourself, and just, you pick up the phone and a recruiter's on the other end. Just be yourself, be who you are. If you're intrigued, we'll share with you. If you're not, tell us that as well. We may come back with, it's a process. If you want to know more, I feel strongly about your candidacy, but just be yourself.
I'm assuming that a lot of times the first phone call you have with a candidate is very brief, and often you reach a candidate when he or she is not able to speak. Is it okay for a candidate to say to you, not right now, can we speak this evening, tomorrow, some other time? Is that an acceptable response?
It is wonderful. We will schedule around you. We'll probably quickly, what is a good phone number for you later? When can I call you back? Would you like to call me back? Here's my cell phone number.
Question from Dan. How involved should the recruiter be in specifying the compensation package?
We have a general idea. I do before I begin recruiting, and that's one of my big questions. And I'm informed, and so they should be informed at least to a range if there will be bonus potential, if there's equity position in the organization, and they should be able to tell you that. And also, when I ask the question about a goal, if we are way off, I'm going to let you know we're not close in range. I will tell you, many clients, when they find the person that they wish to bring on board, there is some room there to negotiate upward if they need to get that person on board. But it's not going to be $100,000 or $200,000. So not usually.
Alexandra is our next question, and she speaks to all of us, I'm sure, and she says, great presentation. Can you provide some examples of questions that you would typically ask in the questionnaire? That's a good question. I'd be interested to know that as well.
In the executive summary questionnaire? Yes, I can. Let me pull one up real quick, and I'll read one to you. They are a little bit longer because you're reading and you're not... One of them would be, and this is not verbatim, but it would be, describe your history as your professional life. So you would go by point, and the transitions, why you transition from one organization to another, and tell us about your achievements and how you were able to achieve that. And so that, that'd be quite a long answer for most people with an essay, and that's just one of the questions.
Thank you. Question from Constantine. So I think this is a scenario. So the client is time and calendar limited, needs to see certain candidates on certain dates and times. The question is, if a candidate finds it difficult to meet the client on a certain date and time, is it reasonable to ask for flexibility if if a candidate feels that it's not an ideal situation? How flexible will the client be, given they often have board committees?
They are flexible. They will provide times. If we can't get a match, we just go further out on the calendar and get a match, and they are open to that. Another thing that we offer at Wheless Partners is we will at times interview, and this is first round only, and video it, one of us interviewing, and then provide that to the client so that they can view it if we can't get a time that matches, so that they could get on a video teleconference call interview.
Thank you. Question from Lisa. This is a good question. Do clients typically prefer currently employed candidates over unemployed candidates? Does being laid off have a negative impact on a client's interest?
In the past, at least in retained search, I believe that they preferred to have people who are currently employed, and indeed that's who I go after. But actually, I look at resumes when they come through, and if they're intriguing and they've got a strong work history, whether they're employed or not, I would reach out to them if it's a good fit, and I have done so, and I've had some good candidates from that. A layoff is not necessarily a negative, but you're going to need to talk about why that occurred.
Thank you. And given we're virtually out of time, this will have to be our last question, I'm afraid. This is from Romulus. Thank you, Romulus. Sorry, this will be from Stephanie. I'll come back to Romulus's. Stephanie asks, is there an age limit you have in mind when recruiting?
Is there an age limit? Pardon me? What's the rest?
The specific question is there an age limit you have in mind when recruiting?
Well, there's not no, there is not a limit. In fact, if someone can work 5 years, they bring value. If they're good, they're going to bring value to an organization. So there isn't. First, I'm looking at their experience and the skills and what seems evident that they've achieved. So there isn't an age limit.
Thank you. And final question I'm going to ask. I'm actually going to paraphrase slightly, Romulus, to make it a bit broader. But is there anything in particular that you look for when you're searching for a candidate? Is there anything that always stands out that you like to see on a GatedTalent profile, a LinkedIn profile, a resume, or anywhere else?
The things that are on the profiles generally are not as compelling as when I get on the phone with someone. Some people do a great job of writing some descriptions on a profile that would draw me to them, and that again would be things like they're candid, they show some passionate about what they do. I mean, they're happy about what they're doing, they're enjoying it. Creativity as well. Those are the things specifically that I'm drawn to. I feel like people who display those, they're open, and they're people who others can work with and follow.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you very much indeed, Lisa, for your time today. Really do appreciate it. I think it was an excellent presentation, and I can see from the feedback from some of our members, they've enjoyed it very much as well. So we really do appreciate your giving up your time. I know you've got a project that you've been working on for 13 months, 14 months now that you need to get back to. So thank you. Really do appreciate it.